Good evening to all of you. It is wonderful to have you here with us on this Advent season where we are in the midst of a profound time in our church and also in our church season. And so we welcome each of you. And I would like to offer Sister Mary John the opportunity to welcome you first in the name of UISG. Sister Mary John?
Okay. Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to all of you from Rome. I'm so happy to greet you. It's about 5 weeks since the first sitting of the Synod on Synodality has ended. We welcome each and every one of you to this two-part series where the UISG Synod Delegates will share their experiences, each with a focus specific to her. So you can look forward to a lot of information, inspiring and interesting anecdotes, and even some taste of the synodal process of conversation in the spirit. As you know, Sister Maria Zimmerman, RSCJ, the UISG Synodality Initiative Coordinator, has been busy organizing groups and spreading news of this transformative journey of listening and communion. We have entered the holy and joy-filled season of Advent, a season of colors, lights, joy, and celebration. I think it is so fitting that we respond to the Church's invitation to deepen reflection and embark on this journey together. On behalf of UISG, the International Union of Superiors General, I wish to welcome all of you. We have the presenters. Sister Maria Zimmerman will introduce them, including Sister Pat, the Executive Secretary. We are very happy that you have made yourself available for this significant webinar. I wish all of you a very fruitful time. Keep alive your interest. You are most welcome.
Thank you so much, Sister Mary John, who's the Holy Spirit sister, who's the Associate Executive Director of UISG. So it's a wonderful community here that brings us online, that brings us to you. And you're really the community, the wide community. And so the first point is to give you thanks and to let you know that your prayers made an incredible and significant difference in the Synod Assembly. We had the three-part series before the Synod began, and you blessed everyone who was coming to the Synod, and you blessed particularly our UISG and the USG delegates. And that prayer is what has moved everything, because the Spirit has been in the midst of this as the protagonist. And so we'll begin today actually with a prayer that in many ways began the Synod. And that was the prayer, the Ad Summus Sancte Spiritus, that was actually played and sung at the Synod, the September 30th ecumenical prayer service that opened up really the journey that moved us for an entire month, and that we'll be speaking about this week and also next week. So it's the Ad Summus Sancte Spiritus that Taizé was invited to build to music. It's also the prayer that was recited during every session of the Second Vatican Council, and it's a prayer even more ancient than that. It's a prayer that we used daily also at the Synod Assembly this October. And so I invite you, the video will give you a sense of the space that we began in, and you'll see Sister Anne is directing the Taizé choir for this opening prayer. So just invite you, the prayer is basically saying, we stand before you, Holy Spirit, and require and need your intercession. We know our frailty, we know your longings. We ask to be listening to you in all. The words will be shown at a later point, but I invite you to just sit. We never stop beseeching the Spirit because the Spirit is always among us, and we're in the synod process. So this is part of the prayer that we're using as much as possible and invite you to continue to use. So thank you very much, Gianluca, for bringing us to the video.
Teach us the way we must go, and how we are to pursue it. We are weak and sinful. Do not let us promote disorder. Do not let ignorance lead us down the wrong path, nor partiality influence our actions. Let us find in you our unity, so that we may journey together to eternal life, and not stray from the way of truth and what is right.
we stand before you, Holy Spirit, as we gather together in your name. With you alone to guide us, make yourself at home in our hearts. Teach us the way we must go and how we are to pursue it. We are weak and sinful. Do not let us promote disorder. Do not let ignorance lead us down the wrong path, nor partiality influence our actions. Let us find in you our unity, so that we may journey together to eternal life and not stray from the way of truth and what is right. All this we ask of you, who are at work in every place and time, in the communion of the Father and the Son, forever and ever. Amen. These are the prayers that we prayed all the time. And so for this time of us sharing with you some of the experience of the Synod, what we will do today is I'll offer a little visual of our calendar to give you a sense of the movement of the time. And then as a theologian facilitator in there, I'm just going to offer 5 words or images to just give you a sense from this end, not the whole of it, but a little taste of what it looked like. And then you're going to have the feast of 5 of our UISG Synod Delegates, and they will each share about their experience. We'll follow that with, as we had done in September, with some time in small groups using conversation in the Spirit. And then we'll invite you to the large group, hear a little from the chats, and then offer our own blessing of Advent to one another and invite you to the next session, which will also be wonderful. I'm going to offer PowerPoint here, slide. To just give you a sense, and there's been wonderful materials from synod.va and in many languages about the sessions, with images, with ways of communicating this, and also with directions for going forward. So we began with knowing that this was the methodology. So anyone could actually follow it and say, this is what's happening. And it's from the Instrumentum Laboris, which was brought forth in May or June. And we began, as you saw, with the ecumenical prayer vigil, and then a retreat, an opening mass, and then 3 different sections. One was looking at church and what it means to be church, which is really the key for the Synod. It wasn't mostly about issues. It was about, what does it mean to be church today? And how is the Spirit inviting us? And so that was the core, and you'll see that moved the methodology as well. And then we had the 3 priority issues for a synodal church: communion, mission, participation. And then moved to conclusions, proposals. But again, those were only syntheses of what had happened, because we'll have time now, a year, before the next Synod Assembly. And then it will be living out also what's offered, proposed, that will go to Pope Francis, because he will be discerning alongside the whole people of God, and then the concluding assembly. So, and a lot of our dynamics, and I would say the most profound part of our gatherings, were in the circuli minori. I actually love that word, minor, in small circles that we gathered in. And so if you see, again, this resource from synod.va, the introduction was a presentation by often the general rapporteur, and then looking at it through some theological lenses. The conversation, the Spirit in the small groups. Then we heard from the plenary sessions, everyone's drafting. And then we went back to our small groups and said, what have we heard? What more? How do we bring this forth? And people, our 5 delegates will share with you more about the circles, but and what happened. But you could just see the visual has been so profound. if you're trying to look at things from a calendar view, I just put this together. So if you look at beginning with the ecumenical prayer service, and then 3 days of retreat, and then 3 days looking at what does it mean to be church, and what does it mean to be church in communion, in mission, and participation. We really worked 6 days. Saturdays were often a half day. There was one day it was a full day. And then Sunday was the time that the participants, the facilitators had some time to do other things, to ponder, to reflect. And then the 23rd of October, the letter to the people of God, which there's some beautiful videos on it, actually came forth. And then the synthesis draft came because our theologian writers were working as they listened to each draft, each product of the small groups were trying to see how does this come together, in what way, what topics. They were listening deeply and reading the papers, the 2-page papers that came from each of the 35 groups. So, but at one point we received a synthesis, a first draft, and we were given time to pray with it, to read it. And I offer you, this is where I went to read it. I went back to St. Peter's Basilica and to where Pope John the 23rd lays in rest, and just read that with him and prayed with him in gratitude, and also to Pope Paul VI. And then we received modifications. And so I think there was a record number, over 1,200 modi, or modifications, which means every group could offer their suggestions for, I would add this, or this I have questions about. But every group discerned this together as well. So much was done in a discernment mode. And then on the 28th, and there were days in between there that the writers were putting things together and trying to listen deeply. And we came together then on the 28th to read again and to vote on the synthesis. And then on Sunday was the closing mass of the first session of the Synod Assembly. So just 5 quick points. If I had to say as a theologian and facilitator, what made the differences? Number one, the Holy Spirit as the protagonist. I have looked over those days and during those days and found myself just really aware that it was only the Spirit who could have done this. It was only the Spirit that could have moved so much, opened so much, carried so much, and deepened so much. Ad summa sancte spiritus, right? The second is an image is that this was about rebuilding community as a response to the polarization that is in so many places in our world and even in our church. Instead of lobbying something one way or the other, instead of doing that, we first built community. We built communities that prayed together, that could share together, that could build trust, that could open spaces, that could name difficult topics, who could say, I fear this, and also I hear this, and I hope this, and my people that I come from long for this. So there was much in there. And a third, I've been more and more struck by, it was about relationships that move things. And Father Timothy Ratcliffe actually pushed things beyond what I think most of us thought of when we thought of coming to the Synod. He didn't ask us to simply come there and be open, but he invited us to be friends, to build friendships. And so there were some beautiful places of that. And Sister Maria Grazia Angelini, a Benedictine sister, was the co-retreat director. And I just invite you, she gave her comments were usually profound, but one was to open up section B2. She has this profound reflection on scripture and women in scripture. So I just invite you to that. And all of this is available at Vatican.va and also on Synod.va. Fourth point, discernment. People will say many things about it. I will just say these small things. Prayer was key. We prayed through everything. Round tables, others will speak to that. Listening. We did more listening than speaking. 3 pieces that were so key were, it was about a lot of silence. It's in silence, something that's so rare, including in religious life at times. Silence, that's such a call for us in religious life, in the church, and the whole people of God. Times to just ponder, to reflect, what is the Spirit inviting? What am I hearing around me, within me, from those with me, from the earth community as well? And it was this process that needed time. It required time. There was not a rush. It was time. And that's a wonderful Advent reflection. Where do I give the time and where is silence? And ultimately, I believe this worked because there was a we. There was a we in this. Each eye brought forth what was calling, and the we ultimately discerned. Nothing was turned in without everyone being able to say, I agree, I have this concern, and it got named and it was listed. In fact, I needed to work through something. So that was the 4th. The 5th, every one of us can practice this. This is not a synodal only event. This is something that's calling forth us in our communities, in our schools, in our parishes. This can be practiced everywhere. And we're already doing this in many places. Schools are using this, communities. I simply want to invite you, every group that you're part of, find a way for this method, and we'll say more about it. But that's just a few of the pieces I would just like to invite you to consider as we're looking at this. And now you actually have the people that are going to move us even further on this conversation. And those are our speakers today in sharing. And so we're going to begin with Sister Patricia Murray. And you know, you've met our sisters already, so I'm going to offer a very brief introduction here. Sister Pat Murray is a member of the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Loretto Sisters from Ireland. She's the Executive Secretary of the International Union of Superiors General, UISG. So, Sister Pat, please. We've invited each person to speak for 10 minutes, and they've invited me to tell them when the 10 minutes are up. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. And the opening hymn and the scene in St. Peter's Square brought me back very much to the synodal journey that we've been on, and which still continues and will continue. And I would want to say that the experience of the synod, which began with that ecumenical prayer in St. Peter's Square, and then the retreat in Sacrofano, and the daily gathering in the Paul VI Hall, had a profound transformational experience for me, because it was a time of deep listening and a time of personal conversion. And during the retreat, Timothy Radcliffe posed many important questions. And one of these was as follows. He asked, are we willing to be gathered together, not just physically, but also with our minds and hearts? Are we willing to be drawn beyond mutual comprehension and suspicion? Timothy spoke about the power of God's grace to make all things new. And quoting a Dominican confrere, he said that the newness that was awaiting us was dawn, discovery, spring, new birth, coming to light, awakening, transcendence, liberation, gift, forgiveness, reconciliation, revolution, faith, hope, and love. He said it is the power of God's Spirit transforming and renewing all things. So walking into the Synod Hall each day, I prayed that I would be fully present with my whole heart and my whole mind, that I would be open to the power of God's grace to make all things new in myself, in others, in the church, and that I would allow myself to be drawn beyond mutual comprehension and suspicion. Because I was deeply conscious that this was a new moment in the life of the church and in our own lives, and that we were being invited to undertake a spiritual journey together as God's people. So you and I are invited on this spiritual journey. You may not have been in the Synod Hall, but you're part of that journey now because you're here. And for me, the synodal process is a continuation of Vatican II. I entered religious life just as the Second Vatican Council was coming to conclusion. And so my formation as a sister, and indeed the whole of my religious life, has been shaped by the major texts of the Vatican Council. And as an aside, I'm just going to tell you or remind you that in preparation for the Jubilee year 2025, Pope Francis has asked us to study and reflect on the 4 constitutions of the Second Vatican Council, the 4 major documents: Lumen Gentium, Gaudium et Spes, Deo Verbum, and Sacrosanctum Concilium. So I invite you to go back, like I had to do, to the texts of Vatican II. So back to the synodal experience. I was apprehensive at the beginning, and so were others who sat at table with me. Maria showed you that we sat at tables of 12, and during the month we were with 4 different groups. We introduced ourselves to one another, and at the beginning of each of the tables, the new table gatherings, we shared how we would like to be called. And in almost all cases, each person wanted to be called by his or her first name without a title. And I think that was a significant breakthrough in becoming friends on the journey to being a synodal people. Generally, there were 2 women at every table, 9 men, and the facilitator, who could be either a man or a woman. I was continually struck by the immense variety of the participants. On the eve of the synod, at the ecumenical vigil, led by the brothers from the Elysée community and the group of young people, Pope Francis had reminded us that we were brothers and sisters from every tribe, from every nation, people, and languages. We were daughters and sons, inspired by the Spirit received in baptism, called to the same hope. So the diversity of cultures, ages, roles, experiences, perspectives, and expectations was an immense richness in the Synodal Hall. This enormous diversity and variety at every level is the abiding sense that I have throughout the whole synodal experience. It constantly called me to move beyond my comfort zone and to enter new realities and new contexts. The contributions from the ecumenical guests from different Christian traditions and from the participants from the Orthodox churches were particularly rich and perceptive. At the tables, we listened deeply to one another, to different insights and perspectives, having first prayed about the particular topic assigned to us from the working document. That deep listening is a spiritual practice. And we were practicing it at every session. So we were in a school of the heart. Each person could share for 4 minutes what he or she had prepared after prayer. And most took great care in preparing those 4 minutes. So whether you were a cardinal or a laywoman, an archbishop or a religious sister or brother, a layman or a bishop or priest, the words of each person were equally important as we listened and discerned together where the Spirit is leading the Church at this time in its history. These conversations in the Spirit were profoundly transformative. I could sense the change and the shift in myself on many topics and issues, learning to appreciate the insights of others whose sharing was often quite different to my own. Timothy Radcliffe had promised that if our words are loving, they will bud. If our words are loving, they will bud. That's an image that remains with me. The buds on the tree, where there are many new buds beginning to unfold. There were 3 rounds in the practice of contemplative listening, with a prayerful pause after the contribution of each person. And after the 3 rounds, we began the final task of deciding together what to include in the final table report. And this report noted points of agreement and points of divergence. All those table reports during the 4 weeks shaped the final document, which was voted on the final day. This type of deep listening calls for freedom, openness to the Spirit speaking in the other. And many participants shared how they found themselves being able to welcome different points of view and to hold the diversity of views in a new way. Others said, sometimes with a sense of amazement, I felt truly heard and listened to. This is the quality of the listening in conversation in the Spirit. Not a debate, but a deep listening to God speaking through the other.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will use the same practice that we did at the Synod and invite a minute of silence to just listen to all the richness and let it move through you that you heard through Sister Pat. Our next 2 speakers, sharers, will share on the aspects of the Synod that emerged as important for each one. And the first one, Sister Maria Nirmalini, is a member of the Apostolic Carmel Order. and she's a religious figure, an educator from India. She has served as General Superior of her congregation since 2020, and in November 2021 was elected President of the Conference of Religious of India, CRI. She was not able to be with us because of her own travels in India, but we have a video of her sharing the experience. So Gianluca, I thank you for that.
Yeah, hello everyone, and I'm happy to be here. I hope someday you can all visit India and especially Kashmir. Currently, I'm on visitation to the state of Kashmir, which is called the paradise of India. As it was said in the introduction, that we cannot separate the experience of the Synod from what we would like to take for our personal lives and as leaders of the congregation. So just a little bit on my experience. It's a great blessing and a gift from God to have been part of this historic synod. It's a spiritual and personal experience. The 3 days retreat took us on an inward journey. The first meditation by Father Timothy Ratcliffe on Transfiguration set the tone for us to enter into the synod without any bias or preconditioned mind. It prepared us well and kept us better disposed to what was to follow during the synod. What I particularly liked from the retreat on Transfiguration meditation was when Father Timothy Ratcliffe said, that the disciples said, Lord, it is good to be here. But after 3 days, you need to come down and walk into the synod. And just as the disciples probably failed, they quarreled, they misunderstood the kingdom, the gospel of Jesus, similarly, the participants at the synod will also go through such times. There will be disagreements, misunderstandings. But he added, I hope there will be no violence. But the highlight of that entire meditation was that the Lord will lead us with hope. And that's how we moved into the synod. And as groups met around the table, there was no barrier of backgrounds or cultures or the country we came from, because it provided space for respectful listening. Cardinals, bishops, lay faithful, religious, all sat around the table as equals. And each one had the opportunity to speak for about 4 minutes on the topic that we had given as our preference. The synod took us to giftedness and uniqueness of our churches as people of God, but it also made us reflect on shadows, our vulnerabilities, especially on the issue of abuse of vulnerable and religious. The conversations and reflections challenged us on issues related to justice and dignity of women and their involvement in the church. A deeper reflection brought us together on co-responsibility and involving all in decision-making process. I'm sure that all of us as participants went back home with lots of things for our personal lives. What did I take from the synod? As the leader of the congregation, my takeaway from the synod was the synodal way of listening, dialogue, and conversation in the spirit. Currently, I am continuing with the visitation of one of our provinces in India. And as major superiors, as leaders, what are some of the things that I am leading and accompanying our communities is to read the document, the synthesis report, and not just read it as we did in the past, but to read, to pause, to reflect, and to share with one another. Therefore, I felt that it is important to begin in our own spaces of work a synodal style of leadership where every voice matters. I also feel the need to stress this point. While there was a lot of talk and sharing about hierarchy in the church, but let's be honest, that hierarchy also exists in our religious congregations. And therefore, it's important for us as leaders to evolve a more circular and participatory form of leadership. As I move from community to community, I feel challenged because as major superiors, our mind works very fast and we want to move from one thing to the next. And I don't know if you have any idea of the travel and the time and the energy it takes in a country like India. It's huge, it's enormous. And therefore, it's challenging to me to be able to listen to the voices of the young in the communities, to listen to the voices of the young in the congregation. And not only of the young members, but also to listen to the lay faithful. I carried very good experiences of the lay people around our tables. They taught me so much. They made me reflect on my own life and my style of leadership. What do I do as president of the conference? Now that's very interesting, because as president of the conference, I have a lot of interaction with the bishops' conference. And the synod actually gave me a lot of strength and more courage, not to fight with the bishops in India, but how to walk together for the larger good as people of the same family of God. So one of the things that I know henceforth that will happen, it was there in a small way, but now I'm more strengthened as president of the Conference of Religious, and particularly women religious in India, which is the largest in the world, is to be able to listen to them, listen to their voices. And as the speakers ahead of me have already mentioned, that it's important to listen to the voice of the minority and how to initiate a process of dialogue, because India, given the political context, is not an easy time for us religious in India. To be precise, not an easy time for Christians at this time in India. So how do we accompany everyone, particularly beginning with church leadership? That's a challenge for me. But one thing I'm sure of is that to lead and accompany, to be able to carry on the process, one of the processes is conversation in the spirit, to be able to listen. And not just listen, but also respectful listening, where we are alert to the signs of the times, and more importantly, alert to the movement of the Spirit. Personally, as a leader and leading my communities, a point that impacted my life very, very deeply was, what do the poor expect from the church? And this is appearing in the synthesis report. The answer that was given by the poor who were invited to Santa Marta for a meal said, we want love from the church. And that impacted me very, very much, because I'm also a bit of an activist, where there is a challenge to reach out to many, particularly the lost and the least and the poor in society. And it's not only love, but I liked what is written in the synthesis report, that they need to be accepted, to be recognized, and to respect the dignity of who they are. And that's what I'm talking to my sisters when we talk about reaching out, that we are not to reach out from a place of position or superiority, but a place where we are equal. The image that Asia gives is of taking our footwear, taking off our shoes when we enter the temple or places of worship, church, mosque, whichever religion. The image is taking off our shoes. And taking off our shoes means just that there is no high or low, but that we are in it together. And it's a challenge, but it's also a deep spiritual experience for me as leader of the congregation, as a leader of the conference of religious. How am I called to listen to that lone voice who wants to say something, who wants us to listen to the wisdom of even the lost and the least? Thank you very much, and have a nice time together, discerning the movement of the Spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Nirmalini. And we take a minute to just sit with the wisdom that she has offered us. We will now hear from Sister Mary Barron. She comes from Ireland and serves as the congregational leader of the Sisters of Our Lady of the Apostles. She was elected to the executive board of the UISG in 2019 and became its president this past September. So Mary will also share on the question, what aspects of the content of the Synod emerged as important for you? Thank you, Sister Mary.
Thank you, Maria. I will just share my screen. I hope you're seeing my screen now.
Yes, yes. Yes, yes.
So thank you. And I'm very happy to be with you all this afternoon. And when we speak of content, our mind goes probably to particular issues that emerge, but it is important to remember that this was a synod on synodality. And so the emphasis is on our way of being church together, embracing the synodal style. And for me, there were 4 images from October in Paul, the 6th Paul, that speak to me of the emerging content that is important. The first 2 of these symbols is the replica San Damiano cross, which greeted us every day as we entered the building. And then the icon of Our Lady that was before us as we began and ended our days together. This icon, borrowed from Mary Major Basilica, is called the health or the salvation of the Roman people. For me, the symbolism of the cross, which called to mind St. Francis hearing the cross ask him to repair the church, repair my house. While the icon points to being rescued from sickness, legend has it that this icon was created by St. Luke and brought by St. Helena to Rome, where it was credited with a miraculous delivery of the city from the plague in the 6th century. So these 2 ever-present symbols gave the backdrop for all that was emerging throughout the month. There were many discussions that highlighted our desire to repair or to deliver us from the ills that beset us in the church. And so many of the 81 proposals that emerged focus on ways in which we can address some of the areas in need of repair, like formation, and particularly for seminary formation, more transparency and accountability, more inclusive processes. The other two symbols are equally important. The Book of the Gospels, which was ever present at the front of the hall, and it came into focus ever more clearly as we prayed together each morning. The final part of the synthesis document, entitled Proceeding Along the Journey, says, the word of the Lord takes precedence over words of the church, and the words of disciples, even those of a synod, are only an echo of what the Lord himself says. The importance of prayer for the synodal journey cannot be overemphasized. As synodal disciples on the journey together, our style of prayer, how we pray together, must help us to listen to each other, help us to discern together. I think this is very important and key for us in religious life. We may spend many hours in prayer as a community, but does the style of prayer we use bring us deeper into encounter with each other? Does our personal prayer foster the capacity in ourselves to detect the signs of the Spirit in our lives and help us to discern? Some of the proposals also suggest a pastoral commitment to widen community prayer beyond the celebration of Eucharist, using alternative forms of liturgical prayer, culturally appropriate forms, etc. And this can be found in chapter 3. The final symbol has already been mentioned, is the round tables. This methodology of being together at the same table, having the same amount of time to speak, the same call to deep listening, this is key to the journey. We cannot overstate the importance of a methodology to facilitate our way of being church together. We use the conversation in the Spirit methodology, but we are encouraged to explore other forms from different spiritualities and traditions within the church. It is not easy to listen to different ideas without immediately giving in to the temptation to counter the views expressed, or to offer one's contribution as a gift for others and not as something absolute or certain. We must find the methodologies to help us to do so, and conversation in the Spirit helped us. There is also a reminder of the importance of discernment and consensus building. We do not function as a democracy, but we must recover an ecclesial and spiritual experience of discernment and consensus building. Democracy is simply the will of the majority over the minority, and there are always winners and losers. But in this synodal pathway, sometimes the wisdom for the here and now is in the tiniest minority voice that must be heard. We heard also about the methodology, the conversation in the Spirit, but conversation itself must be unpacked. Conversation expresses more than mere dialogue. It interweaves thought and feeling, creating a shared vital space. Conversion is always at play in conversation. So conversing in the Spirit means living the experience of sharing in the light of faith and seeking God's will in an authentically evangelical atmosphere within which the Holy Spirit's unmistakable voice can be heard. Some other elements that struck me as important: in chapter 4, which is entitled People in Poverty, Protagonists of the Church's Journey, we are reminded again of the need to be in the peripheries of our church and world, especially during formation. So the document says the experience of encounter, sharing a common life, and serving those living in poverty and on the margins should be an integral part of all formation paths offered by Christian communities. It is a requirement of faith and not an optional extra. This is especially true for candidates for ordained ministry and consecrated life. The refocus of the diaconal ministry is also important. Quoting Lumen Gentium 29, deacons are ordained for the ministry of serving the people of God in the diaconia of the word, in the liturgy, but above all in the exercise of charity. So one of the proposals is, as part of rethinking this diaconal ministry, the Church should promote a stronger orientation towards service of those who are poor. In chapter 5, entitled Out of Every Tribe, Tongue, People and Nation, proposal Q struck me as very important for international congregations. There was a significant number of comments about the missionary approach and the negative impact of evangelization on local cultures. We within the Church are not immune to societal influences, and many have not addressed either past or present experiences of racism. So proposal Q says, we recommend continued engagement in dialogue and discernment regarding racial justice, and systems within the Church that create or maintain racial injustice need to be identified and addressed. Processes for healing and reconciliation should be created with the help of those harmed to eradicate the sin of racism. Chapter 7, on the road to Christian unity, and I think Pat already mentioned the ecumenical delegates and the richness that we received from them. So I sense the call to greater ecumenical engagement, perhaps a call to religious life to be more proactive in this area. Collaboration among all Christians is crucial in addressing the pastoral challenges of our time. In secularized societies, this enables the voice of the gospel to have greater force. Of course, women in the life of the Church. The chapter here is very important, chapter 9, which I invite you to read. And personally, the day we had the discussion in the Assembly on the question of women's participation in the Church, it was a very powerful moment. There was very strong agreement on many questions, especially in relation to assuming leadership roles and responsibilities. Perhaps the final proposals may not seem too groundbreaking, but there are important points there to build on. And I would just draw our attention to the fact that in 81 proposals made in this document, only one is marked urgent, and it is this one, that it is urgent to ensure that women can participate in decision-making processes and assume roles of responsibility in pastoral care and ministry. And then the chapter related to consecrated life, chapter 10. And I think while the development of a new mutue relationes in a synodal style is called for and is very important, personally, the two dimensions from this chapter that strike me as particularly important is the recognition of the abuse of authority and the call to deepen collaboration. I think as religious life, we need to seriously engage with the question of the misuse or abuse of power, especially in the exercise of leadership. Nirmalini already mentioned the collaboration between bishops' conferences and conferences of religious, and I think this is a call. We must be more proactive. We must be protagonists as religious in building better relationships between these different bodies. And finally, formation. The word formation appears 56 times in this document, and from this word cloud from the last part of the document, you see how strong formation is. We cannot evolve as a synodal church without formation at all levels for many dimensions. How to be synodal, how to pray, how to go out as missionary disciples in a synodal manner. So we have much to do in terms of being formed for synodality, and Maria will be there to guide us in that journey. So thank you very much for your attention. And just a final photo of the 10 delegates from UISG and USG. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. There's so much, and we'll only be able to do this together. And so together, let's just pause and soak in the images and the words and the feel that Mary offered us. Thank you. We'll hear now from Sister Elysée Izerimana. She was born in Burundi in 1976 and is a member of the congregation of the Sisters of the Holy Family of Nazareth. She has served in various roles within the congregation and the church, both in Burundi and in Italy. Since 2020, she has been a member of the General Council of her congregation. Elysée and Elizabeth, who follows, will share on what challenges do you see for consecrated life from the synodal experience. So in French, so that those of you who have not yet put your language on, if you need translation, make sure you've marked the bottom and then that you also have your language next to your name. But Sister Elysée, we're eager to hear from you. Bienvenue.
Good day, everyone. And from the experience of the Synod, I wanted to stress the 5 challenges that I've identified for consecrated life. First of all, as we've mentioned it, the synodal style is mostly a way of life. And of action of Christ, and therefore a way of life and action of the disciples, consecrated life in particular. We just lived this experience of a church on the move, which felt the desire to put itself in a listening pose to the word of God, to let itself be challenged by the joys and sufferings of its sons and daughters, and to discern the God's will in today's world, in order to respond effectively to his evangelizing mission. The Synod recognized to consecrated life and associations of faithful the grace to perceive changes and grasp the call of the Spirit. Also, consecrated life, in which we have the charismatic dimension of the church, it has set out to listen and discern, to allow itself be challenged by history and events with a view to its mission. This synodal practice is not new for consecrated life because it's part of our way to proceed in different, in our general or provincial chapters, in our consultative assemblies, in our different meetings at different levels. It must become, therefore, a way of living and acting. And it is also true that consecrated life must always listen to the word of God, listen to our brothers and sisters, listen to the poor, to our communities. We have to listen to our charism and to the needs of the needful. Together, we must discern in a participated way the will of God. Consecrated life must follow the example of the Emmaus disciples in order to meet Jesus, who reveals the meaning of the events and of history, in order to respond more adequately and effectively to the challenges. Secondly, the synodal experience takes up the challenges of communion in the diversity which consecrated life aspires to. So in this path, synodality is not experienced alone, but together with others. It is directed towards the same goal. The different charismatic, cultural, ministerial, generational, and anthropological differences are not obstacles to communion, but they make visible the beauty of a unique but universal church. The experience of listening to the others with their own different point of views, without giving in to direct and immediate discussion, and offering one's contribution as being a gift for others without pretending for this contribution to be absolute certainty, has consolidated unity in diversity and broadened our way of seeing and interpreting events and situations. So consecrated life has benefited from this richness through communities which become more and more multicultural and seek to live this communion in diversity for the mission. And this communion is in itself a testimony of a universal fraternity. And the challenge is to ensure that this diversity can allow everyone to share their own point of view, to be listened to be involved in discernment with respect, but also in the ability to appreciate and to allow himself to be challenged by the other, to give and welcome the gifts that others offer. So differences are not experienced without difficulties, but synodality invites us to come out of ourselves, to collaborate with other charisms and ministries, to clarify each other, to understand each other. For this, we need to be humble. Three, the synodal experience invites us to rethink the gifts and charisms of consecrated life within local churches and its prophetic presence. So religious life and other ecclesial associations exercise its mission through the exercise of their own charism. But often there can be some misunderstandings linked to the way in which ecclesial authorities, and especially the clergy, understands religious life. And they often consider their community as workers or volunteers that need to carry out services. For religious communities, bringing together charismatic demands and service to the mission of the church remain challenges that require mutual listening between religious and clergy and discernment while respecting each gifts in the service and of the mission of the church. It is true that there are also movements or associations of faithfuls that tend to withdraw within oneself, acting as a non-ecclesial entity, and that walk in parallel with the church, that become an obstacle to communion. The solution in this case would be to open to a dialogue in order to consolidate relationships and enable collaboration while respecting charisms and gifts. We need to reinforce collaboration with ordained ministries, with other congregations and societies, with lay people. And this is a wealth that can be at the service of the communion of the church and our congregation. So for this reason, it is necessary, as the synod underlined, to review and restudy the relationship that exists between bishops and religious in order to better collaborate and for mutual assistance in the mission through the revision of the document Mutuae Relationes. This communion must all be manifested in the structures of collaboration between institutes who seek together how to become prophets of the communion in the world. Fourth challenge, consecrated life is called to be prophet of closeness, of its closeness with the poor and the marginalized. The synodal journey made it possible to listen to different categories of people who challenged the church in its credibility and its effectiveness in evangelization. The poor, those who live on the margins of society and the church, those who feel marginalized by the church itself. Religious life seeks to listen to different poverties. It testifies to the mercy of the Father through actions of welcome and accompaniment, and through love and by love, it invites to a conversion to welcome the forgotten people. And in this sense, the mission of consecrated life is to be close to the poor and the forgotten, to walk along them, to show the divine tenderness. Consecrated life is protagonist of human advancement, and it must promote the inculturation of the message of faith in cultures by purifying them of what and in order to contribute to the salvation of men and women. The example through the exchange that we have lived in the Synod, through this exchange, we know that there are still countries where women do not have words, do not possess words, they cannot have family inheritance, they are mere objects. So religious life must collaborate in putting an end to all forms of slavery and marginalization, which weigh on certain people, especially the weakest of societies. And the fifth point, consecrated life and members of associations of the faithful facing the problems of abuse. So, consecrated life, as I was saying, must face the questions of abuse. And the difficulties of abuse are often linked to a poor understanding of the service of authority. For some, authority gives the privilege to act and decide as they wish instead of experiencing their authority as a service. Whether we're speaking of abuse is on behalf of ordained ministers or on behalf of founders or superiors of religious communities, these abuses depend on a distorted understanding of authority and its use. Clericalism and authoritarianism lead to the various abuses of power ad intra and ad extra of our communities and to the exclusion, while the authority in the synodal church must be inclusive, considering the participation of all in discernment to better respond to the mission. Therefore, vigilance is necessary, whether within our communities, whether in collaboration with ordained ministers or not. It is therefore necessary to help our sisters to report and overcome intimidation acts that often they experience. It is also necessary to offer a formation to freedom, to liberty, and to offer good understanding of the vow of obedience to which we commit in obedience to God. And we commit to our superiors, but with mutual respect, far from reducing the person to blind submission. So it remains a great necessity for religious life to permanently train its members to human and spiritual maturation and to be able to respond to all these challenges that I have mentioned. Thank you.
Our fifth sharer is Sister Elizabeth Davis, a Canadian citizen, a member of the Congregation of the Sisters of Mercy of Newfoundland and Labrador. Her extensive ministry experience spans several areas, from education and healthcare to congregational leadership and biblical scholarship. So we welcome you to also share with us about the question of what are the challenges and invitations for consecrated life in light of the Synod. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The Church needs to let herself be questioned by the prophetic voice of consecrated life, the watchful sentinel of the Spirit's call. These words from the Synod's letter to the people of God challenge us who are members of religious life and institutes, while they give us the confidence and the courage to respond. Persons in consecrated life have played a key role in the Synod to date. At the session itself, approximately 118 of the voting participants were members of consecrated life. 28 women religious, 2 religious brothers, 88 cardinals, bishops, and priests, and of course, the Holy Father himself. Approximately 1/3 of the 91 non-voting participants were also from religious institutes. The chapter statements of our congregations echo many of the ways identified by the synodal documents as being at the heart of a synodal church in mission. These documents, specifically the letter to the people of God and the synthesis report, call us to walk with persons who are poor, ill, alone, elderly, abused, uneducated, imprisoned, or homeless. Although our corporal works of mercy say, feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, Jesus' parable in Matthew's gospel and our synodal conversations call us to see our response with new eyes. I was hungry and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty. I was a stranger. We were reminded that there are many whom we know we must walk with and listen to, but we stumble terribly in knowing how to do that. Children and young people, those sexually abused and their abusers, indigenous communities, migrants and refugees, persons with cognitive impairment. Always we must be guided in humility by their words to us, nothing about us without us. Although the synthesis report does not name the members of the LGBTQ community or speak about sexual orientation and gender diversity as different from our dualistic male-female understanding, there are indirect allusions in the phrases issues related to sexuality and bodyliness, and issues related to matters of identity and sexuality. The synthesis report says this: it is important to take the time required for reflection on these issues and to invest our best energies in it without giving in to simplistic judgments that hurt individuals and the body of the church. We need to do this reflection with members of the LGBT community using the wisdom gained from biology, psychology, and social sciences to determine if our present teaching is truly reflective of the Spirit's voice. Being on a synodal journey means walking with people of other faith traditions, being present with them to bring about peace and justice, healing and reconciliation in places of suffering and brokenness, and in places where policies are made and decisions implemented. The Abu Dhabi Interfaith Statement on Climate Change, signed by 28 leaders of world religions on November 6th this year, and the Faith Pavilion at COP28 are recent examples of such walking together. If we are to respond in integrated social and ecological justice, we must walk with and listen to humans, other than humans, and Earth herself. We have far to go in understanding what walking with Earth means when all we have known is walking on Earth. Care for our common home must be among our ways of ministering, say the documents, and the documents go on to state church teaching, liturgy, and practice must more explicitly and carefully integrate the biblical and theological foundations of integral ecology. A new appreciation for cosmology and the universe story means a reshaping of the very foundations of theology today. Artificial intelligence, large language models, and machine learning are diverse names for a creation that will be more intelligent than human beings. Thinkers among us, including the Vatican's Pontifical Academy for Life and its Rome call for AI ethics, are struggling to set ethical boundaries to guide this new creation for good and not for exclusion and exploitation. How do we even imagine walking with this new creation? There are two further gifts that we as consecrated persons from our lived experience can bring to enlivening a synodal church. The document notes that many congregations and institutes practice conversation in the spirit or similar forms of discernment in the conduct of provincial and general chapters. We can be a rich resource in supporting members of parishes and dioceses as they engage in conversations in the spirit, given our use of contemplative listening and contemplative dialogue. As well, our religious communities have consistently used our chapters to evaluate the accountability of our leaders and leadership structures. The document overtly calls for accountability processes for bishops and parish priests. Our existing ways of evaluation can assist in these efforts. There is reference in the synthesis report to the need to address cases of labor injustice and unfair remuneration within the church, especially for women in consecrated life who are too often treated as cheap labor. The document speaks about cases of abuse experienced by those in religious life, especially women. And it calls, therefore, for a revision of mutuae relationes and the promotion of encounters, as we heard from the other speakers, between Episcopal conferences and conferences of superiors of institutes of consecrated life. Given that women are by far the greater proportion of persons in consecrated life, we attend carefully to the approach to women's place in a synodal church. We find hope in the repeated emphasis on strengthening women's place in leadership positions at all levels in the church, positions which until now have been usually held by ordained ministers. We are encouraged by the proposal directly from the report to ensure that liturgical texts and church documents are more attentive to the use of language that takes into equal consideration both men and women, and include a range of words, images, and narratives that draw more widely on women's experiences. But we are discomforted by some words in the Synod report. From the beginning, creation manifests unity and difference, bestowing on women and men a shared nature, calling, and destiny, and two distinct experiences of being human. Sacred scripture, the document says, testifies to the complementarity and reciprocity of women and men. The dualism inherent in these two phrases, two distinct experiences of being human, and complementarity and reciprocity of women and men fails to ensure that women have the freedom to fully respond to their baptismal call. Women are excluded from leadership roles in the celebration of Eucharist, the heart of our church, simply because we are not men. How can we women truly believe that we are created in God's image? Or how can our church become a model for the dignity of women in the world if this understanding does not change? For all of us within consecrated life, the challenge is daunting. It will be tempting for us to defaulting to strengthening the synodal way within our own communities. However, the church needs the energy, the passion, and the hope of members in consecrated life in a special way right now if the vision for synodal church is to be realized in our generation. If this vision is not realized, good people will leave our church, far more good people will leave our church, and far too many people will never find the healing, hope, and reconciliation that our church, listening to the Spirit, can bring. Before the next session of the Synod then, in October 2024, we in consecrated life must go out to the peripheries and welcome many others to walk with us on the synodal journey if our church is to be truly to become a synodal church in mission. Let every one of us listen to God's word in Jeremiah and be among the prophetic voices that persons, our church, and earth need today. God says, "For surely I know the plans I have for you, plans for your welfare and not for harm, to give you a future with hope."
Amen. Amen. And we take a moment now to pause. And I'm going to invite you to just, all of you, to just ponder what struck you, what holds you, what's grabbing you, calling you in your heart, in your mind, as you're listening to Elizabeth and our four sisters who preceded her. So just in silence. When we began these preparatory sessions in September, I said it was impossible to overestimate the importance of this time and this synod. Having served at the Synod Assembly 2023, I repeat this. I hope as you've been listening, you're also sensing this and the energy in both our sisters and the Spirit moving us. You have listened deeply, and now you're being invited to small groups, circula minori, to have at least a small experience of the first step and maybe the second step of what we experienced at the Synod. And so I'm going to share the screen again, just briefly. The conversation in the Spirit, as people have said, is a way that allows for this deep listening and responsiveness to what we're hearing. It's a way toward discernment that leads to a decision. In the first round of sharing, what you're invited to is your own response to the questions. What did you hear that moves you, that draws you? 1 to 2 minutes max. And at this point, no comments, one simply listens. We do need a timekeeper in each of your groups to simply put this out and just to let it go on. We did this with cardinals and we did it with one another. And so we invite you to that too, so that we can hear one another. So no comments, and then just even a brief pause between the sharing. Second round would be, what did you hear from one another in your group, in your small circle? What moved you? What did you hear that moved you? And here maybe just a minute on that. If we had more time, we would invite you to say, what are we hearing? What would you share with the large group? But that'll be for another time, and we can do that. We'll be doing these sessions for quite some time, and you'll be the experts here. But we're just inviting you in your small groups to simply, offer and what's 1 or 2 key elements that are drawing you right now, and then what are you hearing from one another? It's part of the process. You can't just listen without having that opportunity. And so we'll have 20 minutes for this, and then we'll be coming back briefly to both allow people as they wish to share a little bit, and then you'll have some wonderful information about what comes after this. So I invite our magicians of small groups to please put people into the small groups. Introduce yourselves. Somebody just say, I'll be a timer, and then begin. We want to make sure you have at least some time. Thank you. Thank you, Gianluca and team. It really helps if you haven't put EN, ES, or IT, or FR by your name so that you can actually get into the group with good time. So thank you. This way of listening to one another is a way that at one level we know as religious and as church. It's also a way that's calling us more deeply to hear, to realize that the 5 spoke, and what you shared then was another level and another layer, and that's equally important. And this is part of the journey right now that the Synodal Church is being asked to, and because we are part of the church, so are we being asked to. So I thank you for this. We'll find a way to put either in something in an email with the recording, or on some level to be able to put the wisdom that's here forth for you. Allow us to think about how we might do that. You can also find a way to save the chat yourself. But I want to offer some thanks and then a sense of next week. First of all, thank you to our 5 UISG delegates. I know that everyone you listen to, there's probably 8 more hours of wisdom and sharing. And that means it's all of ours as well. But this was a beginning. I think it was worth the wait into Advent. I thank you for your time, your thoughtfulness. And I also have to say, they brought all of this to the Synod. So religious life and the church was well represented here. Thank you. And thank you one and all for joining us on this first of 2 sessions that we're doing. It's our opening effort to engage and listen with the church. Please join us next week when we hear from one of our Synod theologians about the document itself. Anna Rowlands has much to offer us. We will also hear from our brother, Giacomo Costa, a Jesuit, about the implications of the Synod process and the synthesis for missionary discipleship today. The call is not only for living our vocation ad intra, but also in the world around us, ad extra. So Giacomo and Anna will give us much to ponder. And I'm just delighted and anticipate you're joining us. And please tell people about this series and share the recordings widely. This is for everyone. And please bring some friends next week as well. Your homework, if I may invite you to, because you were hearing so much from the different participants, is to read even the beginning part of the Synod synthesis document. It's on synod.va, or you could just Google or use some other means to look it up, but it's in many languages. And so if you can read with it this week, look through it, it only will help. You could find those links online in lots of places. So I thank you for this, because I think we're all on this journey together. And I want to also thank our wonderful communication and technology team, our interpreters, and to all at UISG who give time to this effort, and to all of you who are members of the Why People of God, the UISG members. We thank you for being in this, supporting this, and calling us all forth. So have a wonderful Advent morning, evening, afternoon, night, and we will pray for one another in our church and Pope Francis as we go ahead, and we shall meet again next week. Thank you very much. Merci. Hvala lepa. Gracias. Grazie. And many other ones.